What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to Maps Exposed. This is the series where I go over all of the lines of sight, secret spots, hotspots, as well as all of the important spawns that you need to know on every map in Black Ops 4 multiplayer. In today's episode, we're going to be moving on to Hacienda. And first up, as always, let's have a look at the hotspots that you'll tend to find on this map. Keep in mind, these hotspots will apply to more of the linear team-based modes, not so much to free-for-all or hardpoint, because those are obviously going to be different. Now, the first set of hotspots are very obvious. It's going to be towards the middle area of the map. These areas here are where people will almost always be sitting, generally up top, but sometimes you'll see them down low as well. It's very, very predictable, and if you're ever looking for a fight, you can easily find people here. In addition to those hotspots, though, we also have the areas that transition between the spawn points to the middle of the map. There's these choke points on both sides of the maps, and these areas as well tend to be quite hot and full of enemies. As for the outside lanes, towards the top side and the bottom side of the map as you're looking at it right now, generally speaking, in most modes, these are typically just used as flank routes. They're not really all that common. You can often run straight through these lanes without running into very many people at all, because generally speaking, most of the gunfights are going to be going on towards the middle of the map. Now, of course, every game does play different. Sometimes you get teams that really like one of those particular lanes, but like I said, this is just looking at the map on average. Now, with the hotspots out of the way, we can now move on to some of the specifics on the map. And the first thing I wanted to point out with this map is we have some things that we can interact with. So the first one here is in the garage, and what you can do here is interact with this, and it will cause this turntable to start rotating, and the car will rotate, which will change up the piece of cover that you have here. Unfortunately, for whatever reason in custom games, I can't get this to work at all, but in public matches, it definitely will work. This one's not really all that useful most of the time, but let's get to the next one, which is actually just over here underneath the stairs here. There is something you can interact with here, which will open up a secret doorway, so you can go through there, and it's like a little panic room. You can also open it from this side. If you go to this area right here by the statue, it will open up the door there, and you can go right through that area, or you can block that off. The final thing that you can interact with is over here in the middle of the map. You can interact with the fountain, and this will just turn the fountain on, which really doesn't do much. It might slightly cut off an angle, like from here to that area up there, for instance. It could cut it off. Keep in mind, this can be done from this side as well. So generally speaking, these interactable elements are pretty much useless on this map, aside from that panic room. That can actually be useful in some situations. So now that we have that covered, let's start moving into some of the lines of sight I found on this map. And keep in mind, there aren't too many really interesting ones, but there's a few I wanted to point out for you. So the first one is if you happen to have enemies locking this area of the map down, and they've basically got you pinned back into your spawn over there, and you want to challenge the people that are standing behind this piece of cover here, a great way to challenge them is from all the way back here as you're coming out of spawn, right by this SUV. What you want to do is hop up onto this wall, and from here, as you come up this way, you'll be able to see them there. You have great cover. They're generally not looking back this far, and you'll be able to expose exactly the amount of yourself as you want to them just by creeping up or down or crouching or standing up. A slight alternative to that'll get you a line of sight on that area right there, which is another common spot that they'll sit to trap you back into the garage area, is if you actually jump on the SUV itself. From here, you can see over top of the car nicely, and again, you can crouch to take cover, stand up, and there you go. Nice, clean line of sight on them. Now, from the garage here, this is something that some people still don't know about, so I wanted to point it out. You can jump into the water over here, and you can swim, or you can just run around the edge. And at any point on this, you can jump up on top of the area here. So a lot of times, I like to flank right here, and then jump up here and shoot the guys that are sitting like this, looking that way. Keep in mind, though, you will be making a decent amount of noise if you don't have dead silence when you come in and out of the water, so you really have to be aware of that. Now, getting over into this area right here, I just wanted to point out something you can do with the stairs here. This is often what I do. If I have an enemy that's set up on this area right here, sometimes I will come up the stairs this way and just try and challenge them, and that generally will work, but if they're really paying attention and waiting for you, they'll win that gunfight against you. Instead, what I like to do, since they're sitting here looking like this, they can't really see what's going on right beside them, and what you can do then is you come up the stairs like this, and then simply jump and mantle onto this area, and then you'll be able to take them off guard in most situations. They usually won't see this happen. You can mantle up, shoot them in the side, and they'll still have that tunnel vision looking towards that doorway or towards this piece of cover over here. Next up, getting into this area over here, oftentimes people will stand behind this piece of cover and challenge people that are up in those windows or that window there. A better way to challenge them, though, is simply to crouch and look through this crack right here. You don't get as much of a view as on both of these windows this way, but you can pretty much see most of it, and you can shoot through this crack. You're a much smaller target to hit and much smaller target to see when you do this, and you can even strafe over and see the people over there. Now, another really general thing I wanted to point out, this has to do with specialists. I don't often mention specialists when I'm going through the maps, but this map, I really love using Firebreak on because of his reactor core. Reactor core does work through floors as well as walls, and therefore if you can get yourself into this area, for instance, down here, oftentimes you'll have people camping above you, or if you're up top, they'll be camping below you, and you can easily take them all out using that reactor core. This is amazing for Firebreak. I often see triples and quad feeds on this, just because people don't know what to do when someone's below them using a reactor core. Now, getting over towards the sea domination side of the map, this is also a control point. One thing I wanted to point out, I see a lot of people, they jump up on top of this crate, and then they look over up towards this balcony here to try and challenge people while they're trying to capture the control location, or they can use this to look over top here, which is excellent. But instead of challenging people by jumping up here, which is pretty much what they expect you to do at this point, all you really have to do is back off a little bit, and you have much better control of how much of yourself you want to expose to those enemies. So super, super simple, but I did want to point that out for the people that generally just stand up here thinking that it's a better way. Now, another thing that might be extremely obvious, but I did want to point out, you don't have to go around and go up these stairs. You can simply mantle on here and then mantle up onto this area right here. This is just an alternative for you. Maybe somebody's got mesh mines or they're just sitting here camping these stairs. Now, if you're over on this side of the map and you're looking towards a domination, maybe you have enemies pushing through this choke point right here. Instead of challenging them out in the open like this, you don't really have the greatest cover. With this one, you can hop up right here, and there you go. Excellent piece of cover you have here, and a great view towards that choke point. You'll win this gunfight more often than not. Also, from the same area, you get a little bit of a line of sight to this area here. This won't be as common of a choke point, but in some specific situations, you can expect people to come through here, and this is a much better way to challenge them rather than coming out in the open like this. And with that, unfortunately, that's pretty much it for the unique sort of lines of sight or spots that I was able to find on this map. Generally speaking, it's a pretty simple and straightforward map, and therefore most of the spots are going to be quite obvious. Now let's move into the spawn points. And just a reminder, just like with every episode, these spawn points will change very slightly depending on the game mode, but these are generally designed around the linear team-based modes. So like Team Deathmatch, Domination, Safeguard, Control, these are the spawn points you will tend to see most of the time. And first up, we have the primary spawns. These are the spawns that you'll see most of the time when there isn't much pressure put on the spawns. It's just sort of the default spawn locations. And as you can see here, it's quite simple and straightforward. There aren't a ton of primary spawn locations on Hacienda, and they're pretty much exactly where you'd expect them to be on either side of the map. As for the secondary spawn locations though, these are the ones you'll tend to see when you have a lot of pressure put on the primary spawns, and therefore the spawns have to push into a safer location. With this one, most of the secondary spawns are going to be towards the top half of the map as you're looking at it right now, so towards the water area. But we do have a couple of those secondary spawn points towards the bottom half of the map, although not so much towards the middle, unlike with the top half of the map. So more often than not, if you do push in towards the enemy spawn location, assuming they're not flipping all the way to where your spawns were, they will generally end up spawning towards that water side of the map. Another really important thing to note though is the spawns on Hacienda seem to be very sticky. That means that generally speaking, they're going to spawn at those primary spawns. Even once you start getting almost a direct line of sight on them, they'll still keep spawning there until you get a direct line of sight or until you push directly in there. This makes for some pretty nasty spawn traps in some game modes on this map, and it's definitely something you have to look out for. Just because you spawn in a primary spawn location, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be safe a couple seconds later. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Maps Exposed on Hacienda. As always, I'd like to know in the comment section below. First up, what do you guys think about Hacienda? Do you like the map? Do you dislike it? Just let me know what you're feeling about it and why. And second, let me know which one of the maps you'd like me to cover next. As for my personal thoughts on this map, I kind of like Hacienda. It's not one of my favorites, but I do like how the middle of the map ends up playing out and how it's a little bit different from what you see on a lot of the other maps in the game. But having said that, I feel like most of the map isn't really utilized too well. And generally speaking, like I said, most of the fighting just takes place in the middle area. And therefore, I really don't feel like there's too much variety in the situations and the gunfights that you tend to get into with this map. That's just my opinion though. Like I said, let me know what you guys are thinking down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.
Yeah.